Right. Hi, good evening, folks. Thank you so much for showing up and for joining me. And as you all know, this evening we have an interview. So it's not going to be just me here with visual aids chatting away to you guys. I will be engaging with the former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Stephen Williams, and we are going to be talking about crime, criminality, and of course, the general culture of things here. Hi, Lenleys. Good night. Hi, Gemma. Hi, Listra. Hi, Sharon. How are all of you doing? Everybody good? Let's know what's going on here. Right. Right. So we sorted. Good evening. Actually, we didn't talk about this off air. Is it okay if I call you Stephen?
Sure.
Okay.
But it's okay if I call you Miss Barrett?
Yeah. I know that it would be hard for you to say Rhoda. I know it'll be hard for you to say Rhoda. So that's absolutely fine. It's just that I won't always remember to say Mr. Williams or anything like that. So I just wanted to make sure that it would be fine. So, good evening, and thank you so much for, accepting the invitation to do this interview. So, how did things go on Friday evening with your grandson? Because originally I wanted to have you here Friday evening, and then you said you had some sporting event to go to, yes?
It's athletics training, so
Okay.
I attend to ensure that I am his transport to and fro. So that's a role which I fulfill as a grandfather,
Okay. All right. So,
and I enjoy it.
well, it's useful to know that your retirement is an enjoyable retirement. So, Stephen, you served as Commissioner of Police or Acting Commissioner of Police from 2012 to 2018, a really long stretch of time. So, in that time, my recollection is you were pretty shy when it came to interviews. So, why why was it why was doing interviews in the past something that you were not keen on?
Well, I think that perception that you're sharing is not a factual one.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I say that because I have done countless interviews, um, and I can just go back and pull the amount of interviews that I've done. What I approach the organization with is it wasn't Tobago Police Service, also named Stephen Williams. Stephen Williams was leading the Tobago Police Service, and from a professional approach, we had an established arrangement with the media. We had a communication department, head corporate communication with a direct link to the all media houses. The information would have been shared at management level, and all reporters knew the manner in which we were operating. Anything they required, quick response. They sent in, they communicated, and they got all the responses. I would have been available for at different intervals, press briefings and direct one-to-one with reporters. But in leading an organization like Tobago Police Service, you cannot be available at every moment for the media.
And I hear that. I understand that. I guess perhaps in a society like ours, we tend to always think that when we have an issue that is being addressed, we want the top person, because we bring the manager, call the manager, we want the manager to answer questions. And so if you're saying that
Is that
yes,
right? Is that right?
no, not necessarily.
In a society like ours, we want that. But is that right?
No, it's not right. And I'm glad that you raised the question about
Okay.
whether or not it's right.
Okay.
Because, well, this is a question I had for much later down in the interview, but this allows for it to be asked organically. Your divisional heads, what was the role of your divisional heads from 2012 to 2018? Because the sense that I got is that we didn't always have the divisional heads out there in front of us explaining things and breaking down scenarios. So I know human resource management is a big part of your portfolio as commissioner. What went on from 2012 to 2018 with your divisional heads, and what do you see as the role of divisional heads in policing?
Well, I would want to firstly say that there were some of the divisional heads who would have been shy as relates to communicating with the media. What we did from an organizational standpoint is to effectively train them up. And finally, you would have seen those divisional heads out there, every single one out there on a weekly basis, communicating on a program that I had TV6, communicating issues relevant to their divisions and taking questions from the public as relates to matters relevant to their divisions.
Okay, all
So
right.
so it was a progressive approach, moving from persons who would have been shy, ensuring that they are trained up, and then exposing them to communicate with the public in that kind of fashion.
Do you think that what transpired at that point in time was adequate? Do you feel that more could have happened, ought to have happened? Are there things that you would do differently with respect to the responsibilities of divisional heads engaging with the public on issues?
Well, I would say it's not about doing things differently, it's about progressing. So you would continuously develop them, expose them, so that they can, in fact, be in full control and comfortable to deliver to the media as divisional heads. And that takes a period of time. And as I indicated, it involved progression. And there was some progression in relation to that. And for me, it's about continuing that process, continuous training and development.
Okay. Now, I felt that I didn't hear enough from the various divisional heads. And I'm saying that with respect to, we've got lots of different areas. The police service, the organizational structure of the police service is very complex. You have organized crime, you have drugs, you have, oh my goodness, I've forgotten some of the units and divisions now. But there are a range of divisions. And of course, you have the geographical divisions as well. And I feel, let's take, for example, what would have happened recently here with the spate of murders. In the past, under your tenure, when there were spates of murders taking place, we would be calling on the commissioner of police to explain, to answer things. And I feel in situations like that, divisional heads also had a role to play in explaining scenarios and helping the public to better grasp and understand what was leading to criminal activity and violence. So I don't I'd welcome your input on that. Do you think there ought to have been more from divisional heads explaining aspects of criminal culture here and criminal activity to the population?
I agree there should have been more, but in recognizing where you are, you have to ensure as you progress there is a clear plan how you get to the point that you would want to get to, where divisional heads would have had this what I can call great command of communicating with the media. And we did in fact put together a plan of action to get them there. Separate and apart from what I described with the TV6 program, which was a daily program, but not each divisional head would have been there on a daily basis. Separate and apart from that, where there are major issues of concern to the nation, we had a weekly briefing where we brought uh, individual. Sometimes it would have been a specialist head, sometimes a divisional head. But we brought them to account for their stewardship in relation to that particular situation, and we brought them, and they would have been exposed to the all the media houses at a fixed forum which we set up, and that generally, in my opinion, worked pretty well.
Okay, then the other thing that I want to ask is how are divisional heads selected, and what sort of, I guess, should it be training, transitional planning? What kinds of things happen with the selection of selection and training of divisional heads?
Well, divisional heads generally are of a particular rank. So the police service has a progressive system of appointment. You're moving from one rank to the other. So a divisional head is usually of the rank of senior superintendent. Prior to him reaching the rank of senior superintendent, he would have had to pass the rank of superintendent, the rank of assistant superintendent, the rank of inspector, and I can go on a reversal basis with the ranks. But the point is that he would have been exposed to training and development. So when he reaches the rank of divisional commander or divisional head, he should be well prepared. But what we found is that many of them were not so well prepared. So they had to being exposed to additional training. We use key personnel who are considered subject matter experts from the very said domain of the media to conduct training for the police service. I just wouldn't want to using names at this forum, but
Yeah.
we did in fact employ persons and they conducted training. And I was satisfied that they were subject matter expert and they conducted training and they continue to conduct training. So that was the approach, but a divisional head by way of assignment is basically selected by the commissioner of police for assignment. So who goes as the divisional head for Southern Division, Northern Division, Port of Spain Division, or a specialist unit? It's all a selection by way of the commissioner of police in consultation with his executive team, um, deputy commissioners, and some instances the assistant commissioners, and those persons are assigned.
With respect to recruitment and training, skill building and capacity building within the TTPS, what would you keep and what would you do differently?
Well, I don't know how much you know about the TTPS and its training, but
I know
the
very little,
TTPS,
very little. So,
yes,
school me.
over the period that I led the police service, the police academy became a registered institute in Trinidad and Tobago. Um, that really was a big journey. The requirements by way of the accreditation council in Trinidad and Tobago is a heavy and hefty one. Many academic institutions in Trinidad and Tobago haven't reached the stage of receiving registration status from the accreditation council. So we would have set ourselves a program uh, by way of an approach to get the organization skilled up and operating in a professional manner. Um, we hired a provost, and at this point in time, the provost I hired um, was Dr. Alexis, and I believe he may still be the provost at the police academy. But what it allowed us is to organize training in a truly professional way. We would have modeled some of our training by sending a team out into the UK to look at some of their training institute supporting policing, and they would have fashioned some of the training around that engagement. But the academy in Trinidad and Tobago during my time um, did in fact make what I call leaps and bounds in relation to training for police officers, and receive the kind of endorsement from the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to that progress. So we got approval from government for the hiring of key staff members, and we would have hired persons to assist us in that process.
Okay. The reason I asked about training is twofold, because I think there are administrative skills that police officers need to have, and I also think that there are tactical, I don't know if the word is tactical, or operational skills that they need to have. From time to time, there are videos that circulate of officers attempting to make arrests, attempting to subdue persons in the public domain that are fighting up with them, and the officers come across looking amateur. They come across looking unprofessional in terms of how they are attempting to subdue and restrain persons. So I wondered how much ongoing training occurs with things like that, for things like that, and evidence gathering and writing reports, all of those things. How much ongoing training happens with that?
Well, I'm not in a position to state at this point in time. As you know, I would have proceeded on my
Yes,
pre-retirement in
yes, I know.
2018.
Yes, I know.
So we are in 2022. So I don't know. But I myself, I am surprised by some of those video clips I see with truly poor um, conduct by police officers in relation to carrying out their duties and responsibilities. Um, I would say very, very unprofessional in many instances. But I recall there was a video circulating, I think it would have been in 2017, where some officers from Northern Division Task Force, and it went not only viral, it went international, and it was spread across as a model of how you must conduct your interaction with persons who are armed out there carrying out robberies, and being in a position to apprehend them. Uh, those officers from Northern Division Task Force at the point in time um, did almost everything in a perfect manner. And the comment was made by a foreign journalist as it relates to the quality of display by those officers. So I'm saying that the quality of training is there. What has happened since, I can't say. But I am concerned, like you and most members of the public, with some of the things I am seeing now in relation to how officers are approaching the execution of things like arrests.
2012 to 2018, you sat there. I mean, you would have been there as a career police officer, but from 2012 to 2018, more than one government. So you spanned multiple governments, and there would have been a range of criminal activity that occurred under you. In that time that you served as acting commissioner of police, what did you see or identify as the major reasons for our culture of criminality here?
Our culture of criminality, and this is just my opinion, is because there has been almost a destruction of the family and the values which would have been extended to children within family, as you mold them and nurture them into law-abiding citizens with core values. Issues like honesty, integrity, respect, all those things would have been built from the family environment, whether it's single household, whether a mother or a father alone, or whether it's a household with father and mother and a complete family environment with brothers and sisters and supported by aunts and uncles. The point is that there has been a massive change taking place from the past into the period that I know I led the organization, and into even this period now. I would say this in the context of looking at those social control mechanism or factors. The issue of the family core, number one. The issue of the molding of the young ones in relation to the religious upbringing, the church and its involvement with the young ones. The issue of the education system that we have, and support of the teachers, and not just the support of the teachers, the support of the family to ensure that the teachers can operate as teachers. I say that because there have been so many instances taking place in, I call, modern Trinidad and Tobago, where parents confront teachers even violently. It's something which was a no-no in the past. When I was a student, my common entrance teacher sent a note for my father, and the note required my father to visit the school. And what the visit was all about is that the teacher told my father in my presence, he said, I want these children to be successful in common entrance. However, I tend to use some level of discipline with the whip, and I'm seeking your permission. My father said, and I could call the teacher's name. He said, Mr. Gabriel, beat him as much as you want. I was the first person, and I want you to just listen me out with this.
And I'm
I was the
listening.
first
I
person
mean, I
in my
have follow up
family.
things. Yes, but I'm listening.
Yeah, first person in my family to pass common entrance. Following that, all my other brothers were successful in common entrance. Now, I am not a proponent for using the whip, but one of the things I can say um, from my environment, that teacher and his involvement with education in my village transformed the village in the context of success. Prior to his involvement, the success at Common Entrance was very low. With his involvement, it went high. Now, I am not a supporter for using the whip, but I can say there had been at that point in time a major change. But my main point is that the teacher engaged the parent as it relates to what was his thinking about education and the process of treating with the children. Whether it is right or wrong in relation to the whip, I'm saying the process is that the teacher engaged the parent. What you have now, I am not too sure if the system of teachers engaging parents, but what I know for a fact is that in many instances, teachers are afraid to deal with some children and they just set them aside, and that is the starting of the end of those young ones, because from there they continue down a particular road, and they end up in many instances within the realm of the criminal world.
So what I'm thinking, as you were as you were discussing all of that, and you're talking about the role of the family, molding children, religious institutions, educational institutions, I'm thinking the children that fall through those cracks, or the youngsters that fall through the cracks, that whether it's family or religion or school or whatever, that end up in violent crime. That's violent criminality. But then how do we account for white collar criminality in this space, and the rise in white collar criminality that we're seeing? Because and I'm trying not to generalize here, but oftentimes when you're seeing persons that are arrested or charged with white collar crimes, they aren't necessarily experiencing the same social imbalances that we would be discussing for persons that are dealing up with violent crime. So, if the family is at the core of what we're seeing with persons that end up in violent crime careers, what leads to the white collar criminal being developed?
When I spoke about the family and I talk about the molding, I mentioned some core issues. I talk about honesty and integrity and those key factors. Now, if you talk about a white collar criminal is a person who doesn't have integrity. The issue is about dishonesty. The issue is about corruption. The issue is about issues of fraud and those kind of situations. So I'm saying right back to the very said point in relation to the molding of a young person. So some persons would have been educated and developed, but there are the, I call it those core
They'd be
value items
but
still missing in the white collar criminal.
but they'd be coming from homes, in many instances dual parent homes, maybe even extended family homes. They'd have gone to good schools. They'd have been a part of. They'd have an active religious life. There are any number of current white collar criminals whose names I can call. I won't necessarily call their names here. All of this to say, yes, I think that social institutions and the failure of social institutions contributed, but there are ways in which how those failures contribute to violent criminality is not necessarily they don't necessarily function in the same way in contributing to white collar crime.
Well, I'm saying there are some key considerations which transcend both sides.
Okay.
And that is where I talk about those core values as it relates to issues of integrity and honesty. What made the difference in you not being a white collar criminal? You're highly educated, right? And what made the difference that I wasn't a white collar criminal? Because I can surely speak about
Good.
myself.
That's a good question. So let me ask you that. Why have you not gone the route of stealing money and misappropriating resources? Why didn't you do that?
And that's why I'm saying my molding, my nurturing, my parents from a little boy, they made it clear that you live by certain key mantra: honesty and integrity. If you find something on the road, it's not yours. If you find something in school, it's not yours. You can't bring something, even a pencil, home which is not yours, because you will be whipped by your parents. And I am not again sanctioning the beating, but I'm just saying they molded you and ensure that they emphasize those core values. So it became part of you in growing and developing.
The whipping there, let me contextualize the whipping there, at least the way I see it. Because I agree, I don't sanction corporal punishment either. But the whipping there points to a consequence for action. Whether it's the right sort of consequence or not, it points to a consequence for action. And I think one of the core issues of our criminality problem in Trinidad and Tobago is a lack of consequence. So you have all of these persons, whether it's violent criminals or white collar criminals, engaging in activity, and there is a lack of consequence. And so when they get away with it, other persons see it and think, well, all right, I could try it too. So I think that's part of the problem. But to head back to the point that you were making there about social structures and social structures collapsing or certainly being very weak at this point in time, does it then mean that between 2012 and 2018 there was more focus in community policing Was there more of a thrust where community policing was concerned?
We did, in fact, ensure that there would have been numerous features of community policing operating in the police service. A heavy emphasis because for me, um, the police service could have made a difference in the lives of young people.
When you
Let's say
say
when
could
they
have made a difference, what do you mean by that?
by some key actions, and I'll explain.
Okay.
So part of my vision for the police service in the context of working with the young ones um, was built around youth clubs.
Mm-hmm.
We ensured that we had youth clubs um, in almost every single uh, district in Trinidad and Tobago. And the numbers increase over my time in a phenomenal way. We moved from around 40 something youth clubs to 135. What is meant by that? A youth club was intended as an engagement by the police with the young people within communities, those who are at risk and those who are not at risk. So it's not only focusing on the ones who we believe um, are heading down the wrong road. We worked with those who are heading along the right road in a grouping. So you have sharing, you have molding, you have guiding, and the youth clubs played a critical role in the lives of many, several thousand young persons in Trinidad and Tobago. The progress of youth clubs, it's not limited to when I took office. Youth clubs have been in the police service since the 1970s. The number of youth clubs increased phenomenally during my time, 2012 to 2018. At this point in time, I don't know how many youth clubs are operating in Trinidad and Tobago, which are managed by police officers with the involvement of parents and community support. Because with a youth club, you got volunteers. So you would have been a useful volunteer for a youth club in your area. Because what we did is that people who would have been professionals came in and gave up their time, voluntary service. You weren't paying them for that. They were helping to build Trinidad and Tobago through our youth.
Well, the last thing
So
I heard about youth
mhm.
clubs is that the funding for youth clubs had gone towards a police tournament. I don't know if that has since changed.
All right. I didn't hear anything about the
No,
funding.
that's what I was told. I was informed
Yeah.
that funding for the youth clubs had gone towards a football tournament. It was a fairly new initiative, a sort of annual football tournament, and there was talk about scholarships for youngsters to go abroad and play football. I don't know if within the last year or so if funding has since been redirected to the youth club initiative. But I want to say that I agree with you about the usefulness of youth clubs. I didn't know that there had been that exponential increase from 40 something to over 100 youth clubs.
Not over
So,
100, 135.
right, 135 youth clubs. So
Yeah.
I want to ask this. In that time, from 2012 to 2018, when you had that expansion with the youth clubs, were those youth clubs also in a position to target some of the youngsters who were likely to be heading towards, who were actually already heading towards criminal behavior and criminal activity?
And I'm saying yes, but the youth club was not limiting its focus on only those. It was focusing on all the young persons in a particular area. So it involved those at-risk youths, and it involved those youths who would have been journeying along what I can call a safe and righteous path.
Okay. And
But I just want to share with you
uh-huh.
um, to make the case out for youth clubs. I personally, and I'm just saying how the leadership issue comes into play. I personally made the case out for youth clubs at the point of discussing the draft estimates for the annual budget. And to do that, you had to bill by way of a presentation and convince the key persons out in the ministry, director of budgets and others, um, as to what was your plan and your thinking, your approach, and the intended consequence from government putting funding to support youth clubs.
So
So it wasn't by way of government just saying, well, wait now, youth clubs, let's give them 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. It's about what kind of representation you would have made to convince the director of budgets and the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance and those key personnel for the allocation of funds to support youth clubs.
what kind of funding did youth clubs receive?
Um, well, it varied. It varied I would call it a starting point of around 500,000 to a continuous growth to a point where we did in fact receive $5 million to support youth clubs.
Okay, and what kind of
Now
activities? What kind of? I'm
I don't
not.
know what has happened since.
Well, I can't tell you either. Like I said, the last thing I heard about was a football tournament. So, what kinds of activities were the youth clubs engaged in the communities?
Well, the general trust had to do with um, education, support for education, sporting support, support for things of like entertainment, musical support such as steel band and all those issues. But it's all geared towards helping and supporting and molding and nurturing young people to be the kind of adults that we will be proud of.
Okay.
So different youth clubs had different specific initiatives taking place, but the general principle was about support for young people. For instance, in Sangre Grande, they had a program which was an extremely successful one for which the Ministry of Education sought to adopt or adapt. It had to do with young persons who would have been suspended from school, finding a place to spend the period of suspension, whether it's a week, 2 weeks, where they would have been sent to the youth club and supported over that period of time and guided so that when they return to school, they will be returning with, I would say, some level of influence, positive influence as to the things they should be doing at school and how they should be focusing. And that was a very, very successful program out in Sangre Grande. I could name other programs about the country, but I'm just highlighting that very said one. And I don't know if the Ministry of Education has fully adopted it because, as I said, I'm out of the business since 2018. So I don't know what's the state right now.
What other community policing initiatives occurred? There's the Youth Club initiative, and I'm aware of the Youth Club initiative. What else was going on with respect to community policing?
Well, community policing, as you would readily appreciate, um, is really based on a philosophy as against a program. But in it is that basic involvement where the police are engaging with the community, all geared towards improving life in the community and solving problems of the community. So if we think about enterprise, we had a major initiative in enterprise. In fact, enterprise won that initiative in enterprise won the President's Award for innovation in relation to the effort in transforming that community. Now, I speak about that to say that the officers would have engaged there doing many things, including ensuring that the young people there do not focus on gangs but focus on sports. They supported the issue of the basketball court. They supported programs with the Trinidad and Tobago Cricket Board of Control, training the young ones in cricket. So there were numerous initiatives built around the enterprise intervention. What you found out by way of, if you can call an outcome, by way of enterprise was a drop in the level of violence that was taking place in enterprise. Now, I'm speaking about then and not now, right?
I know. I
Because
know.
I am reading a lot of things about enterprise right now, but I'm speaking about then. So you found that young persons in enterprise, they, that very initiative was even supported by the American embassy, providing some level of training and education for members of the community, and the young people in enterprise. So out of that, you found some level of growth. There are individuals out of enterprise who would have gone on through sporting involvement to be out. I will call it on the global market, um, uh, because I know one individual who I think is into basketball. Another individual who was involved in football. So they have several success factors and success cases that they can speak to, but I'm speaking about enterprise, and I can speak about many other communities. But the whole trust with community policing, it was about engaging with the communities to find workable solutions to the problems that those communities would have been facing. And from a leadership position, in support of that, the Trinidad executive, Trinidad Police Service executive, ensure that we ran, I would call it an intervention, where we went and visit all communities, um, to ensure that the public had a direct one-to-one with the leadership of the police service to share some of their concerns in relation to policing, some of their concerns in relation to crime and other issues. But the leadership, and I speak about the leadership in the context of the person sitting as commissioner and some of his key executive members would go out there. It occurred every single week, going in one of the communities, to ensure that we have what we call community meetings, to have an engagement with the community in relation to the challenges that were confronting them. Then built in into the strategic plan of the organization, was ensuring that the patrols that we were instituting would have been built on what we call people-centered patrols.
All right. So
And
let's talk about
uh,
the people-centered patrols. There is something I want to come back to with respect to what you've been saying about community policing, because there is another part to this issue. You're talking about the police trying to fill particular gaps in communities, in depressed and distressed communities. But there is only so much the police can do in those communities, because the police can't provide opportunities for people. You can find ways to distract and divert the attention of persons and ask them to get off the streets, yes, but you can't provide opportunities for people. And one of the things that white collar criminal activity has done is that it has provided opportunities for people. It's not legal opportunities, but that's what it does. It provides opportunities for people to be able to make money. So whether it's human trafficking, whether it's drug pushing, whether it's gun running, or any of the other things that happen, illegal alcohol, exotic animals, etc., 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 the TTPS can't provide those opportunities for persons to say to them, hey, we could give all you a job to do or work to do, and so you don't have to go and do this. So in that situation, in that scenario, your other option, your other job now is to get rid of those opportunities, those illegal opportunities. What were the challenges you faced with those putting a stop to those illegal opportunities that were arising?
but just to, as you speak about those opportunities, uh, the major counter to opportunities like those has to do with how we approach nation building and nation development. And when we speak about national development plan for Trinidad and Tobago, and we focus it over a long period of time, it must be one which is networked. So uh, just what you are highlighting, I went to a community in Laventille, part of Laventille, and I went there as the head of the police service. My main focus had to do with the crime situation and how best we can improve our policing of the community. I got at a particular community meeting not a single complaint about crime.
What do you
The
mean
people
you got
people
no complaints
concerned,
about crime? What were their concerns then?
their concern was about employment. They wanted help to get jobs.
And that's it.
No,
But
that
that's
took
the
me by
point.
surprise.
We're making the same point here. I'm thinking
Right,
there
I
are
agree.
communities you're going to get into, and they're not going to be complaining about criminal activity in the communities. They're going to be complaining about how do we get jobs or how do we get money. And the TTPS can't provide jobs and money. That's
No.
not so. That makes communities like those there where people want jobs and they want money, it makes them fertile for these criminal activities that need persons to come and put on a work. Whatever the work is, come and put it down, because you don't need skills to be able to do some of these things. You don't need to have, paper. You don't need to have CXC and GCE and CAPE and whatever else to be able to do any of these things. So, in situations like that, the TTPS, how do you then go and put a stop to the illegal opportunities that present themselves to these communities?
Well, that has to do with how you treat with crime generally. But I want us not to miss a key point.
Sure.
You see, we are speaking about TDPS, but I'm making the point that it is not limited to the TDPS alone. It is a networked approach where you have collaboration and coordination and support from different institutions and many governmental agencies and departments to treat with the challenges that we have as a country, Trinidad and Tobago. And that is where policing is one thing, but policing could just go so far. And even in looking at policing from a contemporary position as against the traditional focus on enforcing laws, seeking to arrest and prosecute individuals, that traditional mold. If you look at it from a contemporary policing mold, where we speak about community policing and the involvement and support for addressing community challenges, which go beyond just the strict uh, uh, crimes in the community, but additional problems relating to the community for which the police are involved. There is a whole gap. If the police service by itself stands alone, and that is why going to communities and they are asking you for jobs, you can't provide jobs.
No, you can't, and that's the point, the essential point that I'm making. The TTPS can't provide jobs, and so you have these other entities that will eventually seep into the communities and say, we have these opportunities for you. The government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago can only provide so many jobs as well, and the government will, and the private sector as well can only provide so many jobs. So you're always going to be in a situation where there is a percentage of the population that is unemployed. And oftentimes that percentage of the population that is unemployed is also unskilled and probably without documentation, without accreditation for its skill sets in particular areas. And so they are always going to be fertile ground for these entities that providing illegal activities and basically saying, here we have this job for you.
And there is very little the police service can do about that other than to target the individuals who are dealing in drugs, dealing in white collar crime, targeting those persons. So you use different policing strategies to so do, to target them, but that doesn't bring a solution to the problem that we are confronted with as a society. Because if you arrest one person in our community, or you arrest three persons within our community, and you have a lucrative trade taking place, you may put a small dent to that lucrative trade. But when you speak about the gaps which exist, those gaps are not limited to policing as the solution to address the gaps.
I want to bring you back to the issue of patrols. You were talking about doing targeted patrols in communities.
Yeah.
How useful or how successful are targeted patrols in communities?
Well, here I'll be speaking about what is referred to as evidence-based policing, which is considered as the new paradigm of policing, for which Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, under my stewardship, went fully into that domain, because evidence-based policing is where we bring in research evidence to bear on policing approaches, to make determination that from a scientific position, and I'm speaking about research as against scientific by way of policing evidence as it relates to forensic and those other sciences. I'm speaking about social science and its involvement with policing, where you are now looking to see that the things that you do out of your limited resources, how can I make best use of those limited resources and ensure that the things I am doing will work, as against doing something not knowing whether it works or it doesn't work. So what we did is that we approach the organization from a change process to educate the officers in relation to evidence-based policing. And then we focus one key strategy under evidence-based policing, that of hotspot policing, to address the issues of our policing of what we call concentrated locations of crime.
And in your opinion, did hotspot policing work? Did it make an impact?
I would say yes, it did make an impact. And I would say it will continue to make an impact if you continue to treat it with. When I say yes, I am not speaking with a yes or no. There are published.
Go ahead and qualify. Go ahead and qualify what you mean by success, because of course, all of this is being said against the framework of a population that feels that it has been the victim of crime for decades. I'm not saying that it's specific to your tenure as Commissioner of Police. So we have a population that feels traumatized, that feels victimized, and it keeps thinking that none of these initiatives that it would have heard of, whether it is hotspot policing, Operation Anaconda, whatever, the population doesn't feel as if these things have worked. So if you're saying hotspot policing was successful, how are you gauging that success? What for you were the measurables in terms of hotspot policing?
All right, I'll give you one example. I'll give you many examples, but I'll start with one because we don't have much time to give. Once you permit me, I'll give as many as possible. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service changed the way we patrol Trinidad and Tobago. And we changed the way we patrol Trinidad and Tobago by ensuring that if you have limited resources, you must maximize those limited resources to get the best result. So what we did is that we collated the data in relation to crime. Um, we've used the examples out of other locations. So there are things which would have been researched in the UK, the US, and other parts of the world. And I'm not looking at issue of generalizability of those things to say, well, because they work out there, they will work here. In order to make a determination if it will work here, we have to test it. So we have tested hotspot patrol in Trinidad and Tobago, focusing firstly on violent crime hotspots. And then we have looked at general serious crimes and hotspots. But let's look at violent crime hotspots. We did an experiment in 2013 utilizing what we can call a randomized control trial. We had 40 police stations, and we, by way of distribution, we had 20 selected as experimental stations and 20 selected as control stations. What was used to distribute the 20? We first use a pairing system. So the stations with the highest level of crime appeared and coming down in pairs. And then you randomize the pairs. So one will go in either treatment or control. But when we dealt with that, we looked at violent crime in the context of homicides, woundings, shootings, and we started with the two groups, control and treatment groups, with 71 violent crimes. We ran that experiment for 3 months. The treatment groups, the numbers dropped at the end of the 3 months. We had 56, and in the control group, the numbers went up to 95.
Why? What accounts for that?
And we can safely say, because it was randomized, we use what is considered as the gold standard of experiment, RCT. What was the intervention was hotspot patrols in those hotspot locations in those treatment districts. And it is published. It's published out there in a journal. But what it sent to us is that there is a possibility for us to have interventions to make a difference.
So I just want to make it clear for the listening audience. When you conducted that 3-month survey, you had hotspots.
Well, not survey.
Well, sorry, that 3-month exercise, is that the correct term? Is that
experiment?
That 3-month experiment. Yeah. You had communities with hotspot policing and communities without hotspot policing.
Communities with normal policing.
Normal patrols. And in the hotspot communities, the crime statistics went down. And in the communities with normal patrols, crime statistics went up.
Well, the numbers, I wouldn't use the term went up, right? Because what would happen is that you're comparing periods, 3 months as against 3 months. So what you have is a difference where in the communities which are the control ones, you had a higher number over 3 months.
Right. As opposed
and in the communities which were treatment, you had a lower number compared to the 3 months before.
The prior 3-month period. So you'd be, let's say you're comparing 2012 and 2013, the same 3-month period for 2012 and 2013, I'd see a difference in the figures. Am I correct?
No, well, we use a before and after analysis using 3 months before the experiment to look at the numbers, and 3 months with the experiment to look at the
So
numbers.
3 months and so basically a 6-month comparative period in 2013.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Fair enough.
Yes.
Gotcha. So you're saying that in your time, hotspot policing was shown to have worked when you did the figures in that 2013 period. So, if that is the case, for the rest of your tenure up to 2018, did you continue with hotspot policing, and were you seeing the same sort of results?
Right. The biggest challenge as it relates to policing violent crime. Now, I want us to recognize that in Trinidad and Tobago, we speak about an increase in crime, but crime on a comparative basis has been reducing over the years.
Why do you say that? Like, against what are you saying that?
22,162 serious crime in 2008. And we speak about the same crime types. When we speak about serious crimes, we are speaking of those crimes which are so categorized because they attract the highest penalty by way of the law. So, they are normally considered those arrestable type offenses, robberies, break-ins, larcenies, shootings, woundings, murders. That same grouping of offenses, 2008, same grouping of offenses. If you look at another period like 2013, 2014, 2015, you will see the big disparity with the numbers in relation to robberies, break-ins, larcenies, and those type of offenses, as against the challenge with shootings, woundings, murders. So we have stayed steady, almost steady, and in some instances with some increases, slight increases, on violent crimes in Trinidad and Tobago as against other crime types.
So other crime types, we've seen a decline.
Significant drop.
Right. But woundings, shootings, murders, we've seen those numbers hold steady, and in some instances, in some years,
Increase.
there have been increases. And I'm
2
sure,
years.
and I'm
2
sure,
years. I just want to share this one piece.
Go ahead.
2 years. 2 years. You've seen a drop. I would say a significant drop. First year you've seen this significant drop, 2011. And the second year you would have seen a significant drop is 2020.
Right. And 2020 we know was an anomaly.
Both years were anomalies. And I'll tell you why. Because you had what I can call an artificial intervention.
Yes.
In the context
20
of state of emergency.
Yes, I was about
So
to
in
say.
2011, there was a state of emergency running from August into December.
Yes.
In 2020, with the advent of COVID, we had a state of emergency. People were locked in. They couldn't come out to even go to work, right? And we had a drop in violent crimes.
Right.
Now, surely that by itself signal that there is a possibility for violent crime to drop.
Yes.
But you cannot use that artificial intervention as a means to facilitate effective policing into the future.
Well, in both instances, 2011 and 2020, what you would have had was a suspension of citizens' rights.
Yes.
Right.
And that allows citizens not to be outside.
Right. And
they were caught up, almost caged in their home.
My point is, to have that decline in those statistics, you have to corral a population. That's what you're saying to me. That's what the data
No,
says to
what I'm
me.
saying, I'm just saying the data.
Right.
That's the data.
So
Right.
let me correct.
I'm not saying
Right.
corral
So let me
the nation.
so let me correct.
Hmm.
Corralling a population is what led to those figures showing that significant decline, right? In terms of,
That's my view.
right, it is not even the data there. The data is there to establish this happened
Yes.
in those 2 years, and there was lockdown in both years, and that's when you saw the massive decline in those violent crimes.
Violent crime. Mhm.
We can't do that every year
No.
just to be able to reduce crime in a country. That
No.
would be unconstitutional. So, this then leads me to my next question for you. Surely, I'm clear that you understand that a population needs to feel that it is safe. It's not enough to say the numbers went down, this has gone down, that has gone down. A population needs to feel that it is safe. And the population doesn't feel that way at all. What kinds of collaborations take place between the TTPS and other organizations in this country? And by the other organizations, I'm referring to, let's say, customs and excise, as a for example, immigration, as a for example, the prison system, as a for example. What kinds of collaborations take place between the TTPS and these other entities, so that there is information moving back and forth to feed into your policing activities?
Yeah. One of the things we did was to bring, by way of all the heads of those agencies, together on a weekly basis at the office of the commissioner. When I use the office of the commissioner, basically at police admin building, where we would have had a meeting arrangement, and we would in fact strategize around working in collaboration with each other and sharing of information, utilizing individuals out of our various agencies to provide key pieces of information generated as relates to the different agencies, and plan out courses of action, so that we can get as much improvement out of the working together. So we did that. Um, you see, if you think about the best period by way of success in policing over the last, I would say, a decade and a half, occurred around the period 2014, 2015.
Why do you say that?
The statistics are there. But one of the things which happened is that the police service got boosted by way of resources.
How so? What kind of resources was it boosted with?
We got 300 vehicles to support what we were launching out on, that, as I referred to as hotspot patrols. Across the nation, I don't know if you can throw your mind back.
I
Across the
can.
nation,
I can.
every part of this country, every night, people were complaining even of the amount of flashing lights and whatever, police presence across this nation.
What happened to those vehicles?
Remember, police vehicles will not last as long as a private person vehicle. So you have to have a consistent system of, I would call, replenishing your fleet.
So the
It
300
requires
vehicles are no more?
resources.
Some are still there, or they all gone,
And
or
when
what?
you, I can't speak to what is the state of the fleet at this point in time,
Okay.
because I am speaking in a time base reference as against the present situation.
Was
So,
the
but
fleet
I'm seeing some new vehicles on the road because
was
I'm seeing some PEB and PEC and whatever.
was the
So there are
fleet
new vehicles on the
intact?
road.
Was the fleet intact up to 2018? Because you served up to 2018.
No, well, the thing about I want to explain this to
Sure,
the
sure.
to the education of the general public. Politicians speak about a budget which is given to the police service. The police service is not given any budget. In other foreign countries, a commissioner of police is allocated resources on an annual basis, and he has to effectively manage that resource that is allocated. And if the management of that resource means he cannot rehire police officers, so be it. The decisions are his. How do you manage the resources we assign to you? In Trinidad and Tobago, you are not assigned any resources.
So
There
then,
is a budget which is read,
uh-huh.
speaking about how much $2.5 billion or how much is given to the police service. And you don't receive a single cent unless a release is made, whether it's on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, or what kind of basis. The only how you receive money is by way of releases.
But don't you get the
So
releases? Don't you get the
you don't,
releases though?
well, I'm saying you do not get what is allocated in the budget.
So if the budget, let's go with a hypothetical figure. Let's say the Minister of Finance says $2 billion to the TTPS in that fiscal year. So let's say fiscal 2023 that coming up. Are you saying that for fiscal 2023 you will not necessarily get the $2 billion that the budget says has been allocated to the TTPS?
And that is what I'm saying. Yes, you will not get that $2 billion. You will get some of that.
Okay.
And people tend to always engage in discussion in the public domain. Look at how much money the police get in the budget. Police didn't get any money in the budget. It's the releases which count by way of getting.
So then
And in some years, you get better releases, and in other years, you get less releases, and you have to now juggle how you pay bills and those type of stuff. And that is why you would have had a big set of bacchanal between the last commissioner and the Minister of Finance in relation to money and releases.
So then I
A
want
public piece of bacchanal.
Yes, it became very public. So I want to ask this then. What's the role of the line minister where that is concerned? Because when the budget is read, that the TTPS money would fall under a particular line ministry. Not so?
No, with the TTPS, the TTPS was supposed to be treated in a special way. So the TTPS gets its under the broad rubric of national security. The TTPS gets its allocation because it has its own accounting officer.
Yes, but the commissioner of police is the accounting officer for
And the
TTPS.
TTPS is different to the other departments in the Ministry of National Security.
Okay.
The Minister of National Security doesn't deal with the allocation. The Permanent Secretary deals with the allocation as the accounting officer.
Which PS?
So if you're speaking about the
which PS?
National Security PS will deal with the allocation for fire, prisons, the General Administration of National Security, Defense Force. But the PS National Security will not deal with the allocation for the TTPS. The Commissioner of Police deals with whatever releases are made for the TTPS as the accounting officer.
Right. And so my question is, we know that the budget allocates a certain amount of money. We know that the commissioner functions as the accounting officer. Is the issue here how you apply or how a commissioner applies for the releases?
No, the issue is how the government provide you with releases.
Okay.
Remember, remember, the government has one pool of
Mm-hmm.
money to distribute for all ministries and departments.
Mm-hmm.
How they distribute that on a monthly basis is determined by the Minister of Finance.
Mm-hmm.
So how much you get is a determination made by the Minister of Finance based on what he has in his coffers for the month.
Okay. And I guess I'm thinking about it in a very basic way in that if 2 billion has been allocated to the TTPS, they can't move that 2 billion or part of that 2 billion to another vote. Can they move that to another vote? Can they move it to another ministry? Can they move it to another division? I My understanding is that you can't. So if it's 2 billion that's allocated to you, I am now wondering, well, why is it so difficult for the Commissioner of Police to be able to access the allocations? But I'm not going to bog down the conversation with that because there's still a couple other things that I wanted to be able to talk about. We were talking about effective policing, we were talking about patrolling. And one of the things that was made clear during your tenure was an event that you weren't present for, but it occurred under your tenure, and that's the day of total policing. And it showed the population that if and when the TTPS put its mind to doing something and coordinating something, it could coordinate something very, very, very efficiently and effectively. Even if the coordination on that particular day it didn't redound to the benefit of the of the society. So my question to you is this: what prevents the police service at this point in time, or even under your tenure, from coordinating activities that would redound to the benefit of the population with respect to crime fighting?
Well, I just shared with you that we did, in fact, um, present a complete approach to coordinating our activities. And if I explain to you how we coordinated our activities, we utilize a system called ComStat, where all divisional commanders, and I'm speaking about it in a generic way as against anything else, because it's not only divisional commanders. You would have those executive officers and heads of specialist units and whatever, right? So I'm just speaking in a generic way. All divisional commanders come to a meeting with the commissioner and his executive team to account for performance as it relates to whatever would have been those measurable targets that have been set by the organization for the year, and broken down by way of timelines which we assess on a weekly basis.
So
So
correct
so
me
so that. Mhm,
correct me if I'm wrong, because you
mhm.
talked about Comstat, you talked about all of these various entities and heads meeting and having the meetings that you're referring to that would have taken place at police headquarters. And you also pointed to the fact that the best time under your tenure with respect to policing, or the most effective, let me put it that way, the most effective period of policing that you would have had was 2014 into 2015, and you tied in the fleet of vehicles to it. So I want to know, from 2015 to 2018, what were the challenges that didn't allow you to continue to have that fluid era of effective policing?
Well, you had a change in government,
Yeah.
and with a change in government, you have change in plans, policies, strategies, approaches, and you also have a change in how you see the distribution of resources. So I am saying that there was a change, and there was an impact by way of the change, because what we got in 2014 to 2015 as I spoke about 300 vehicles, that was an unprecedented increase. And it occurred because the cabinet of the day um, called upon the commissioner to account why they were not getting the kind of results that they wanted. And a major point was made that in order to get the results, these are the things we have to do, and these are the resources that basically require. With all these resources, we can't ever get the results. And we did that. And the cabinet of the day approved at the half yearly point an allocation for the police service to access the 300 vehicles. We took those 300 vehicles supported by GPS tracking, and we were in a position to know exactly where a police vehicle is at any given point in time. The locations that we describe as hotspots were what is described as geofence. An electronic ring is placed on that so that you can, in fact, be able to track when a vehicle enters that location and when the vehicle leaves that location. You're able to time the amount of minutes spent by a patrol in that location. We are able to time how much minutes spent in the day, how much minutes spent in the night. We are able to identify the need for increases if we want to impact crime. So all that was being done in an organized way. Hotspot patrols, divisional commanders with a clear mandate to do certain key things with certain targets and measurements, and they are being called upon on a weekly basis to effectively account for progress.
I'm listening.
And we got progress.
Right. And so, are you saying that?
But you have to get what I can call continuous support in a significant way if you are to stay on top of the game.
Right. So I want you to remember the timelines that you've given, 2014 into 2015, and you linked to that the increase in resources, right? The increased resources. And then
increased resources, change in policing approach.
Right. Increased resources, change in policing approach. Then from 2015, you indicated change in policing approach and, am I right to say, decrease in resources?
Yes.
And what would have been the change in policing approach?
We continued. Our policing approach, we continued what we were doing. But the point is, if what you're doing, you don't get the resources to back it, then you cannot do it in the way it's supposed to be done.
Okay.
You see, fighting crime is not only about policing, but fighting crime and policing now in a contemporary environment requires continuous rethinking, adjusting, and making things work, testing what could work, what can't work, getting the kind of resources to do some key things. So you see, over time.
So what were the other resources? What were some of the other resources you wanted to be able to access over time?
Well, one of the things is that technology, in the form of CCTV cameras and those type of stuff, that face some challenges with a relationship between B-Mobile or TSTT and the Ministry of National Security and the costing of that. That may be something which still
it's still jumping up. It's still up in the air. There's a lot of there's a lot of red tape still around that the issue of the CCTV cameras. So vehicles, CCTV cameras. What else were the resources you felt you needed to be able to see that meaningful change?
And you really needed to bring to bear the kind of Trinidad and Tobago purchase um, technology which can make a significant difference in policing in Trinidad and Tobago. And that has well, I don't want to say has never been. During my tenure, it has never been fully operationalized.
Okay. All right. I've held I've held you hostage for almost an hour and a half. You must be exhausted by now. So I'll ask my final question. You functioned as acting commissioner, and we recently would have put an ad out for, where we're looking for a new commissioner of police. What do you think what do you think a commissioner of police needs to have by way of personal accomplishments and achievements to properly function in the role that you sat in from 2012 to 2018?
Well, one of the things I can tell you that there is a fundamental flaw by focusing strictly on qualification as a prerequisite, saying you need to have a master's degree in law, criminology, criminal justice, and management.
Why do you
That
disagree with
that
that?
is
Why do you disagree with that?
well, I disagree because you might be shutting out persons who can be highly skilled, highly trained, highly qualified as leaders, and they don't have one of those prerequisite degrees. Not that they don't have a degree, they don't have one of those prerequisite degrees that is a master's degree in these specific fields.
Okay.
Now, I am speaking here openly. In my position, I had master's degrees in many of those prerequisite fields. So it would not have affected me if I was applying to be a commissioner with those degrees highlighted. But I'm just saying, from an organizational standpoint, it is depriving the organization from what I can say, some of its maybe key resources. There may be people who are highly skilled, highly qualified, highly trained, and in the best leadership position to run the police service, and they can't get in the groove because they have boxing a listing of those areas of master's degrees.
So you think the recruitment approach needs to be revamped?
I think so.
Okay.
And they have to change the law as it relates to the police service. You see, the police service has always been a focus, but a focus not for improving, for worsening our situation.
How so?
Right now, are you aware that the law provides for the 3 deputy commissioners, and there are only 2 deputy commissioners appointed through that process with Parliament?
Yes, I'm aware. I'm aware.
And why not a third?
Because the persons in Parliament
No,
have
not
been dragging their
Parliament.
feet. The government, sorry.
No, no, no,
Then
no.
what's the
It's
problem?
because of that very said point I'm making in relation to the master's degree qualifications that they identified.
Really, but to me
So you have people with
no, but to me there
master's
were names.
degrees
But to me there were
and they
names.
cannot be appointed.
But then there was a list of persons, and to me there are at least two persons for they tend to have a debate and then they do the voting thing. So I'm not
There,
understanding.
there there was a requirement for 3.
Yes, and I'm
They
saying
could only fill 2.
okay, okay. I'm
And I'm
probably
saying, I'm saying, when government take decisions which turn out to not to be in the best interest of the country, because by so imposing, somebody sitting and deciding this is the mix, we are putting out this and we publish this. Now the Police Service Commission has to work with whatever government publish by way of the order to what qualifications they see fit. But the issue is that those are not right kind of blockages. So it's blocking out in some instances, maybe the best police officers for leadership at the police service by way of those limitations.
All right. Well, this is where we're gonna have to wrap it up,
And I
Stephen.
want to make one more point.
Sure.
One more point. Are you aware that unlike any other head in any part of Trinidad and Tobago, the commissioner, in order to leave this country, whether to go on a conference or whatever, can't leave because you have to go through a process where they have to send things through the president to parliament to make a
Yes,
decision
I'm
on
aware.
somebody to act in his place for those few days.
I'm aware. I'm aware
If
of
the
the.
chief justice is leaving the country, he can just fly out. If the prime minister leaving the country, he can. Who bigger than those persons? If the president is leaving the country, those are the biggest offices in the land.
But
No, it doesn't happen with fire. It doesn't happen with prisons. It doesn't happen with chief of defense staff. It happens with police service. They are doing so many things to cause the police service not to be effective, and then blaming whom? The leadership of the police service for its ineffectiveness.
so then let me ask you this: the Service Commission. What was the role of the Service Commission and all of this? How is it that you can't, as commissioner, you can't through the Service Commission get those amendments done? Because last year, let me finish. Last year, the entire country was in a position to watch a legal notice amend the Police Service Act that turned into a huge fiasco. So, and of course, all of it centered around the Service Commission and whether the Service Commission requested something or didn't request it, and the Attorney General, etc., etc., etc. So I'm asking, because I'm less informed than you are here. Is it that the commissioner can't get the Service Commission to get those changes made?
Well, I don't know what the commissioner can or cannot do, but what I can tell you, last year, the country ran for a whole period of time without a commissioner of police, which is something you couldn't ever envisage happening in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, now we know that things can change. Things can be done differently. Things can happen. Former Commissioner Stephen Williams, thank you so much for the time that you spent with us this evening. There are a number of areas that I didn't get to cover because I really wanted to talk about militarizing our population, but we didn't get to that. So I'm hoping that at some point in time in future I can bring you back and we can look at a couple other areas.
Sure.
All right. Thank you
Thanks
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you so much for the time that you spent with us here this evening. Enjoy. Take care.
Okay.
So, folks, that was former acting commissioner of the TTPS, Stephen Williams. There were things that I wanted to ask I didn't get around to being able to ask, but I will bring him back and we will touch on those issues in future. And you all have yourselves a good week. I will catch you all on Friday. There are a number of other things that I want to be able to touch on. I saw some things in the newspaper this weekend. I feel like me and the editor of the Newsday, we have to have a chat. And then, of course, there were things from Prime Minister Rowley's press conference yesterday that we definitely have to touch on. So I will see you guys on the weekend. Have yourselves a good week. Take care, folks. Bye.